6 years after a fertilizer facility exploded in the town of West,
We think it's a continuing problem.
too many Texans could still be in harm's way.
There's a lot of this stuff out around Texas in the rural areas, and I would imagine some folks aren't trained in it.
We want to know why so few firefighters are prepared.
Is there any tracking happening?
Our investigation is coming up. Lawmakers move closer toward final plans for school finance and property tax reform, but state leaders want them to work faster to reach a deal. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. With just 3 weeks to go in the legislative session, things are moving faster at the Capitol. There's a rush to reach a deal on big priorities like school finance. As Wes Rappaport shows us, some lawmakers worry they're moving too fast.
This has been a grueling process, but it's worth it. I appreciate your vote.
An emotional education chairman Larry Taylor in a Senate committee hearing this week asking his colleagues to vote on a bill they largely haven't seen.
I'm reading stuff for the first time that is concerning to me, even the stuff that's here. Now, I do have to laugh that, this bill was originally almost a shell, a blank bill, and there's still some blanks.
I just want to be sure as we move forward in this process that we have the opportunity to deliberate over those things that our educators aren't comfortable with, that families in our districts aren't comfortable with.
I apologize for having to do this at the pace we're doing, but based on the time and where we are in the session and what's going on with the House and changing some of our revenue sources for this, some of those bills have to start in the House, so we needed to get started to get this out to show them where we have a bill that they need to help us fund.
Part of the urgency came from the leader of the Senate, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who tweeted about expediting the bill out of committee to get it to the floor, where it'll see a slew of amendments. And they'll need to make time for negotiations between the House and Senate versions.
The House is going to have some different opinions. We're going to have to work with that when it comes back.
The last day of session is May 27th. I'm Wes Rappaport for State of Texas.
Lawmakers are also running out of time to make property tax reform a reality. It's a priority for the big three state leaders, and they came together Friday to send a message.
And I know that with us on the threshold of an enormous week coming up, when property tax relief will be voted on in the Texas House, as well as in the Texas Senate, as well as school finance reform in the Texas Senate, there's a lot coming forward this week. And we want to know that we want the members of the legislature and the Capitol to know that we are here to support them, to work with them, to help their constituents be able to afford to continue to live in the homes they cherish. If we are able to pass a sales tax increase that will be dedicated to driving down property taxes, if you add that to all these other strategies that we are working on, we're going to be able to leave this Capitol and inform our fellow Texans that their property tax bills next year are going to be less than they were this year.
State leaders promised school finance and property tax reforms, but the one bill that has to get done is the budget. Right now, that's in the hands of a conference committee of 5 Senate Republicans, along with 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats from the House. Representative John Zerwas is leading the negotiations on the House side. Wes Rappaport talked to him to get insight into the challenges and the keys to reaching a budget deal.
Both sides have presented their budgets, and we're now reconciling those budgets. We're really about halfway through that process, if you will. Really anticipate having the bill voted out, probably sometime after Mother's Day, and then probably on the floor of each chamber right towards Memorial Day.
These processes are so intertwined, right? I mean, so walk me through the property tax, the school finance discussion to this point here with 20 days and change to go here.
I think, in our chamber, the substitute for Senate Bill 2 and how that plays with House Bill 3 is very, very connected, as a matter of fact. It's all connected by virtue of what we put in the budget and the money that we put in there. And so that's where you start. And so, we decided as a chamber, and the Senate conferred with this also, was to say we're going to put $9 billion more into public education and into property tax relief, real relief. And so, we had the same amounts of money in there. And so from there, House Bill 3, could be created, which was largely created as a consequence of the interim special commission. The deep study that was done is now reflected in legislation that addresses those issues. All of that comes with price tags, and they were working with the understanding that $2.7 billion would be used to provide tax relief, but $6.7 billion would be used to help really redefine the school finance system and to put new money in the school finance system. And so that is where HB 3 and House Bill 1 really kind of play together. Now, House Bill 2 is a property tax reform and transparency bill. So it's a little bit different in that regard, And so what we're saying in that one is that, yes, property taxpayers, we heard you. We're going to try to slow the rate of rise of your taxes, but we're also going to put in here some incredibly important transparency aspects to the appraisal process and where your taxing occurs and where you can have a voice in all of that and stuff. So those are things that we look at. And then if you put on top of that, which is where you have a lot of conversation right now, is how do you pay for this in the future? Now we've got a lot of money this legislative session and during this 2-year period of time, but is that going to be a sustainable way to fund our public schools at the level that we've done this, and at the same time keep a lid on property taxes? So you hear now the talk about a 1-cent sales tax as a way to do that. And the reason there is a lot of interest in that is that it generates a lot of money. And if you look at it historically, it's continued to increase. And so it's sustainable and reliable. And it's $5 billion a year. And so, if you look at it from that standpoint, for a biennium, for $10 billion, you can do a lot to make sure you keep property tax relief in place. And you can do a lot, to fund our public schools on a go-forward basis.
Do you think that there is enough support in the House to move forward with the tax swap?
Yeah, I think we're still working on that. I don't think it's a free ride at all. I think there are some people that are very concerned about it because they've heard from their constituents that they don't want a 1-cent, a sales tax increase. Even when you explain that it's critical in order to continue to provide property tax relief and to provide adequate funding to schools and stuff. So we're working through that right now, and there's a lot of conversation going on with regard to this. We know that the top 3 leaders who are leaders in our party, are all together on this. When you're starting to talk about any type of a tax increase, I like to say it's nice to have the cover of the governor and the speaker and the lieutenant governor to do these kinds of things.
What do you see as the biggest roadblocks, the biggest challenges in these last couple of weeks here?
There's always some big ticket items that are in the bill, and at least with regards to the appropriations bill, and it's the only bill constitutionally that has to be passed. And so House Bill 1 will pass, and it will have an amount of funds in it that reflects the reconciliation between the House and the Senate, and it's done in a very, very conducive atmosphere towards let's do what's right for Texas. It's not me trying to win over you. It's trying to get to where it's the right place for the state of Texas.
House lawmakers move closer to easing the penalties for marijuana possession in Texas.
This is a bipartisan issue that has overwhelming support from Texans across the political spectrum.
But despite all that support, this bill just hit a big roadblock. Find out who could keep the state's marijuana laws from changing. Texas House members voted to reduce the penalty for Texans caught with small amounts of marijuana. House Bill 63 lowers the penalty for possessing an ounce or less of marijuana to a Class C misdemeanor. That means a ticket and no arrest. The bill also offers a pathway to remove those charges from criminal records. El Paso Democrat Joe Moody authored the bill.
Our current law means that a 20-year-old college kid caught with $5 worth of marijuana can end up being treated like a criminal at a job interview 30 years later. And that's if they even get the interview in the first place. And that's wrong.
The bill passed 103 to 42, but even before the final vote, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick declared the bill will not become law. He posted a message on Twitter saying, "Criminal Justice Chair John Whitmire is right that HB 63 is dead in the Texas Senate." The Lieutenant Governor said he will join those House Republicans who oppose this step toward legalization of marijuana. The bill has not been scheduled for a vote in the Senate. A bill that would better track maternal deaths and near misses is one step closer to becoming law. A Texas House committee voted in favor of the Maternal Mortality and Morbidity Data Registry bill. Representative Sean Thierry from Houston filed her bill as Our Mothers Erased investigation highlighted problems with tracking data. The bill would create a data registry. Thierry worked closely on changes with the Texas Hospital Association, which had concerns when the bill was filed. Participating healthcare providers would submit patients' health information during and after pregnancy. The next step, it goes to the Calendars Committee and then a full House vote. We will keep you updated.
We feel that this is an extremely important issue, and if we don't share these lessons, then more firefighters could lose their lives in the future.
But we found few volunteer firefighters have taken a specially designed course to avoid the next disaster, like the deadly West fertilizer explosion. Our investigators ask why the state is not making this a priority.
You know, as a fire chief, my number one job is the safety of my guys and making sure that they all go home at the end of the day.
Learning from disaster. April marks 6 years since the deadly West fertilizer plant explosion. Our investigators first showed you Williamson County's new technology that maps out worst-case scenarios for more than 250 facilities that store hazardous materials. This includes ammonium nitrate. It's an effort to make sure first responders know what they're up against and who to evacuate first. But now, investigator Aaron Cargile reveals other recommendations from the federal agency that investigated the explosion have not been put into place, which could put your community in danger.
Josh, the goal is to make sure there is never another situation like West. However, in Texas, we found very few volunteer firefighters are specifically trained to handle this fertilizer. Across the state of Texas, in the 72 counties, are facilities storing over 10,000 pounds of the same type of explosive fertilizer. This number is based on the last study made public in 2013. Rural communities are typically served by volunteer firefighters, and they're the most likely to come face to face with this dangerous scenario. With the entire country watching, a dozen first responders were laid to rest.
Let their deeds serve as an inspiration for all of us to live lives of meaning.
The West Volunteer Fire Department nearly wiped out in an explosion that's still top of mind in Williamson County's small town of Taylor.
West was a big eye-opener for us because we have the same scenario here. You know, we're a rural county.
Taylor's volunteer fire chief Billy Hughes says fertilizer-grade ammonium nitrate, also called FGAN, is a big deal in their farming community.
Not only do we have a few of the mass storage sites in the area, we also have our individual farmers that keep it in their barns. You know, if this grass were to take off here, start running up the hill and get to that barn, we don't know what's inside that barn. That's what scares us.
In addition to their regular fire academy, he's had several volunteers go through FGAN training after the U.S. Chemical Safety Board's West investigation found firefighter knowledge lacking. The federal agency highlighted its findings in this video, which includes a computer-generated recreation of the explosion.
And in Texas, volunteer firefighters are not required to receive even a minimum level of training on responding to fires involving hazardous chemicals.
The fact that you had 12 first responders on the fire ground who lost their lives fighting a fire whose hazards were unknown or unclear to them tells you everything you need to know about the importance of this issue.
Not only did the CSB call for a special FGAN course, it recommended that the State Firefighters and Fire Marshals Association create a certification and make it mandatory for all volunteer firefighters in Texas,
so that we know that there's a greater probability that the information they're getting is correct, technically correct, and will be protective should they ever fight another fire with large quantities of ammonium nitrate.
But so far, it's not happening. Why has your association not created a certification for Afghan training?
There's a lot more to creating a certification other than just waving a magic wand and poof, you've got a certification.
Chris Barron is the association's executive director.
It has to go through validation and testing. It has to be created on a curriculum that's recognized by national standards. There's no other state, or there's not even a national level organization that has an Afghan certification, so Texas would have been the first state to create such.
There is a free Afghan course. Texas A&M's extension agency, called TEACS, just started offering last year, but they say only 25 volunteer firefighters have taken it. That's out of 30,000 volunteers statewide. The 8-hour class is designed to train the trainer, where one person takes it, then shares what they learn with the rest of their team. So that's really not a lot yet.
Not yet, certainly not yet. I think it'll grow, and it's still new. It takes, in the fire service, it takes a while for people to catch on.
Going in! 15 feet!
The reality is volunteer firefighters in Texas are not required to do anything, and training is left up to each department. North Hays County Fire Rescue, which is part volunteer, likes the flexibility of focusing on what its crews will most likely encounter in their area, like wildfires or trucks carrying hazardous loads.
We always predict for an all hazards type of approach, and that's what we have to do, is be an all hazards type of organization and on our training side as well.
Their volunteers have not taken the specialized Afghan course. But for those like Taylor's Chief Hughes,
He's got his tractors, his barns, his house.
who say the risk of another ammonium nitrate explosion is there.
I would like to see it as a requirement from the state level, absolutely. Anything that's going to save a life.
In addition to the Afghan course, 1 year after West in 2014, TEACS started offering a course called Embers for short. Here's the full name. It is geared toward responding to all hazards firefighters could encounter when responding to an industrial emergency. More volunteer firefighters have taken this course, just over 570 statewide, but still a long way from 30,000, which is how many volunteers there are in Texas. The other big question, are there departments near fertilizer facilities who are not trained? The answer is yes. TEACS sent me a list of departments who've had someone take their Afghan course, which we've mapped out for you. Here's the map. If you scroll over the dots, it lists the specific VFD with a yes. The black dots are VFDs who have not sent someone to the training. You can see this map now in the Texas Politics section of your station's website, so you can see if VFDs in your area are trained. And Josh, even though TEACS sent us an old list of facilities that store large amounts of ammonium nitrate, the Attorney General ruled that that needs to be kept confidential. So we have decided not to put that old list out.
Got it. Thank you very much, Aaron. As the Texas legislative session comes to an end, the race for the presidency in 2020 is just getting started, and all eyes are on the race within the race. We'll look closer at the fight for money next on State of Texas. We are still 10 months away from the Texas primary, but many Texans are already starting to notice the growing momentum of the 2020 presidential race. You might have even received a text, email, or letter about fundraising. Politics reporter Phil Prazen takes a closer look at which candidates are bringing in the big money and what it means.
Money isn't everything, but it helps, especially in politics. We just finished Q1 of the 2020 presidential Democratic primary, and here's what we know about fundraising right now. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is a fundraising monster. He came in with a massive database of donors from his 2016 run, and in Q1, he raised $18.2 million, followed by Senator Kamala Harris, then former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke. Most of this money is coming from small donors, a new powerful political force that Democrats have tapped into with the advent of online networks like ActBlue, which makes donating simple and fast. But they're not the only ones with money. Senators and other office holders in D.C. have a unique advantage over governors and other state leaders because they can transfer campaign money between accounts. That's what happened for Senators Elizabeth Warren and Kristen Gillibrand. They both switched around $10 million from their account for United States Senate to an account for President of the United States. And then you have outliers like John Delaney, who put in millions of his own money to compete. And former Vice President Joe Biden, who entered the race after the Q1 deadline, but says he raised more than $6 million in his first 24 hours. Money isn't everything. Just ask Jeb Bush, who had a bunch of money in 2016, only to lose.
Please clap.
But money does allow you to stay in the conversation longer, and it allows you to get your name in front of voters more often. Whoever comes out of the Democratic primary will likely face incumbent President Donald Trump, who raised $30 million in Q1 himself. Ladies and gentlemen, we have officially entered the 24/7 campaign. Remember the last presidential election, how everyone was like, oh my gosh, Senator Ted Cruz is announcing for president so early. That was the summer of 2015. We already have 20 candidates in this race, and we are further away from the election. And a lot of them will have the resources to let you know about it.
Thanks, Phil. Campaign donations are really important for Democrats who want to take part in the primary debates. In order to get a spot on the debate stage, candidates have to receive donations from at least 65,000 people, and they need to have a minimum of 200 donors in at least 20 states. Poll numbers can also put a candidate on the stage if they register 1% support in 3 different polls. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.